All right, guys, today we're going to be talking about the PlayStation 5 and the fact that it has officially been out for 1 year. It's crazy to think that the PS5 has already been out for an entire year. It feels like just yesterday I was unboxing this console, making a video for you guys, talking about it, and booting it up, streaming my first couple of hours with Demon Souls. Good memories, good times, but it's been 12 months since I've done that. And so I thought it would make a lot of sense for me to talk about my experience with the PS5 for the past year. But more importantly, I want to focus on a single question. And I think it's truly the most important question to ask. And I think that anybody who has been playing on the PS5 this year, or anybody, especially anybody who is planning to pick one up, it's a question that I think you should be asking. And that is this really next gen? Does the PS5 still, after a year, feel like that next gen experience that everybody hoped it would be? So to answer that question, I think the answer is yes. Now that's just my opinion. I'm going to explain why I think that is, but I think there's a little bit more to it than that. It can't just be as simple as, yes, absolutely, you should go buy a PS5. The truth is, it's not a necessary next-gen experience. And what I mean by that is if you're somebody who cares about the things that the PS5 is offering, such as better visuals, higher frame rates, a few exclusive games that hopefully will, the number of exclusive games will increase substantially over the next couple of years, which will obviously change the nature of this conversation. But you have to think about the DualSense. You have to think about the load times, right? These are the things that you have to keep at the forefront of your mind when you're asking yourself what a next-gen experience to you is. Because the truth is, as we go further into each console generation, it seems like the leap is becoming less and less. And I talked about this when the PS5 first came out, and it was one of the things that impressed me the most with what Sony tried to achieve with the PS5, and that is that they weren't just trying to wow you with better graphics, although I think we can all agree that they certainly achieved that. You look at games like Demon Souls Remake, Spider-Man Miles Morales, even what they did with the ray tracing in Spider-Man Miles Morales, as well as Spider-Man Remastered, and games like Returnal, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. I think everybody can agree that Sony did a very good job on the visual side of things and keeping people feeling impressed with that aspect. But I think Sony knew that that just wasn't going to be enough to justify the conversation around a next-gen leap forward. Now, one of the only things that really changed in a significant way from the time that I unboxed my PS5 this time last year to where we are now is when I unboxed my PS5 on November 12th of 2020, we were under the impression, as far as I'm aware, that most exclusive games going forward were going to be exclusive to the PS5. Games like God of War Ragnarok, GT7, and if I'm not mistaken, I also believe it was Horizon Forbidden West as well. I'll have to go back and double check that. I forget when it was announced exactly that that was going to be making its way to PS4, but nonetheless, there was this feeling of, most games that Sony's first-party studios are producing are going to take advantage of the PS5, maybe not full advantage, but they're going to be PS5 only, and it really was going to just kind of drive home that feeling of, oh, this is absolutely a necessary console for me to have, and anybody who cares remotely about these games, they're going to want to go out there and try to buy one as quickly as possible. Now, maybe it works out in the end that Sony decided to kind of change it up and say, actually, Forbidden West is going to be a PS4 game, and so is God of War Ragnarok, and actually, even though we advertised GT7 as a PS5 only game, turns out we're going to release it on PS4 as well. You look at the struggle that people are having finding PS5s. I think it was at this point safe to say it was the right call. But with that being said, it also does take away from the PS5 itself. And so if you're somebody who says, you know what, I want to experience the DualSense, I think what Sony's doing with the DualSense is something that is going to go beyond just the visual aspect, and it matters to me. I mean, I can vouch for that. I've been playing with the DualSense controller for a year now, and I've experienced many different games that use it in different ways, and it's an integral experience. It really is one of the defining aspects of the next-gen experience that I am referring to when I talk about the PS5 being next gen. But for some people, they're not going to feel the same way. While I feel very impressed with the DualSense and it feels strange to play any games that don't utilize it or have that type of intricate feedback, it feels weird to me. To other people, it's not going to make a difference at all. To other people, they're just going to feel like, oh, it's nice, but it really doesn't matter to me. And so that, in a way, could make it feel less next gen to you. But I do think the DualSense is one of those things where you have to get it in your hands and you have to try it yourself to really, I think, understand what exactly it's offering and how it's elevating the immersion for each game that's utilizing it. And so you look at the games, you look at some of the features, as I said, visuals, ray tracing. I think ray tracing has been something that we haven't seen too much of, but when you see Sony Studios implementing it in their games, it is extremely impressive. Games like Ratchet and Clank, I'm mainly thinking about Insomniac Games actually with Spider-Man and Ratchet and Clank. I mean, it's been extremely impressive, but I think maybe ray tracing was oversold a little bit, and I don't think that that's something that really is going to matter to most people once they get their hands on this console, if they get their hands on it, right? I think that at first it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I want to see what this console can do with ray tracing. But as you just start to engage with it and play it more, you realize that that's not really nearly as important as frame rate. Frame rate to me is easily the biggest thing that has differentiated last gen with the PS4 and the PS4 Pro to what I'm experiencing now with the PS5. Every game I've played, and I'm not exaggerating, every single game I played on the PS5, I've played at 60 FPS. And there have been times where I would switch from the performance mode in a game to the fidelity mode, and it would drop at the 30 FPS, and I immediately went back to performance mode. Now, I understand that there are plenty of people who are like, hey, I can play games at 30 FPS. I have no problem doing so. In fact, that's what I did with the PS4 and the PS4 Pro, right? Like almost every game I played was at 30 FPS, and so I was used to it. But now I'm used to 60 FPS, and that to me has been the biggest difference between my last gen experience and my next gen experience. And I know it sounds crazy to some, but to me, that is the next gen highlight. That and the DualSense combined have really come together to create an experience that I just didn't have with the PS4 or the PS4 Pro. And the higher resolutions and the ray tracing whenever it's there just kind of feels like the icing on top. Now, when it comes to the UI experience of the PS5, I think it's safe to say that some of the things that Sony did with it were maybe just for the sake of making it feel new and making it feel fresh, but in reality, they weren't really necessary. I think on paper, the cards that were there and still are there for the PS5 games that support it, it was a great idea, and I was very excited about them at first until I kind of came to the realization and the conclusion that I don't actually use them. I used them at first when I was playing games like Miles Morales at launch and a few games after that, but since then I've kind of just forgotten about them and I don't really use them at all. And so I think it was a nice attempt by Sony, and I'll always appreciate that, them just trying to do something, and it just maybe doesn't pan out the way we thought with the card system. But that's one of the aspects of the PS5 that I just don't think really did a good job in making the console seem more next gen. I think that's what it was going for. It wanted to make it seem more next gen, and it definitely was different and new and unique, but in the end, I don't think it worked out the way Sony was hoping it would, or the way that maybe some of us thought it would. But in general, the UI experience is pretty great. At first, you're always going to have a little bit of a learning curve, and at times it might be a little bit frustrating because you're learning a new UI. You have to get used to where everything is, the placement, what to press, and it can be, as I said, frustrating. But once you do get it down and it does become second nature, I think you'll really start to appreciate how smooth it really is, how good the overall UI experience feels, and it certainly does feel different from the PS4s, and in some ways I do think it is better. But something else I do want to talk about is the 3D audio. Now, this is something that, frankly, I haven't really experienced too much of because I don't really play my games with headphones on that often. But when I do, and 3D audio is supported, you can definitely tell, but it's not anything groundbreaking. I think that this may also fall into the category of one of the things that maybe was overhyped just a little bit. I mean, we do have to understand that when it comes to next gen consoles and marketing, there's always going to be a certain amount of hyperbole thrown in there just for the sake of creating hype and getting people excited, and it certainly works. But 3D audio is there, and if you listen close enough, you can detect it, but it's certainly not anything that I would consider groundbreaking. And something else I absolutely do have to talk about before I end this video is the SSD. I mean, that's pretty much all that was talked about with the PS5. It's the SSD, SSD this, SSD that. And, you know, I would say it pretty much has lived up to the hype mostly. And when you play a game like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, you can clearly see like why Sony was really emphasizing the SSD inside of the PS5, but not just with that game. I kind of don't really know what load screens are anymore, right? I've gotten very much accustomed to when I start up a game on my PS5, it's instantaneous. When I, need to restart a section of a game, or if I die in a game and it brings me back to a checkpoint, it's instant. I've just gotten so accustomed to it that because it's been like this for a year now, it's easy to forget what it used to be like. And so this is certainly one area where, yeah, it definitely feels next gen. Like if you have never experienced instantaneous load times like this, and you're just so used to having these long 30-second, minute and a half long sometimes load times when booting up a game, that just doesn't really exist on the PS5. I mean, it is truly like cut down substantially to just a few seconds at most for the overwhelming majority of games. So definitely a huge improvement there. You talk about the games and the lineup of the PS5. The PS5 has had a very strong year of releases. And so it's really up to each individual to kind of look at these games and look at these releases and determine for themselves if these are titles that speak to you and you might want to consider investing in a PS5 for. If you are somebody who's interested in Demon Souls Remake, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Returnal, these are PS5 only games. Yeah, you might really want to try to get a PS5 because they are all great games. If you think that they're great and you like what you're seeing, chances are you're going to have a good time, because I've played all three of them and I can confirm they're really solid titles, and they do a great job at taking advantage of the PS5 and showing what the PS5 is capable of. But if you're also somebody who just plays a lot of third-party games, or you're just looking for other types of exclusives, that's on offer here as well. And in general, I think that the support for the PS5 has been very, very strong for the first year, and it's only going to get better. But I now want to just, again, kind of come back to the question, is this a next-gen experience? Is this next-gen? My answer is yes, but it is not yet a fully necessary next-gen experience. I think that's a perfectly fair way of putting it. If you're somebody who feels enticed by anything we just discussed, then to you, it probably will feel like a necessary next-gen experience. But if you're somebody who's still kind of not sure whether or not you want to invest in a next-gen console, I think it'll be okay to wait a little bit longer. And some people are going to have no choice because of how hard it is to get a PS5. But I just don't want you to feel like you're missing out on everything, right? Like the best is yet to come when it comes to PS5 exclusives. Everybody knows that. But all in all, my time with the PS5 over the past 12 months has been great. It's been everything that I hoped it would be. There really are no aspects of the PS5 that have really let me down. I do think that Sony could afford to maybe try to be a little bit quicker with, adding new features, but I'm not the type of person that's sitting around kind of waiting for like this feature, that feature. I'm just enjoying the experience as it is. And if we get more, down the line, which we obviously will, then that'll just kind of add to it. But, I kind of knew what I wanted out of next gen, and I was already sold a while ago on what the PS5 was offering and what it was bringing to the table. And so I guess at this point, the only thing I'm really waiting to see is, and this is going to take time naturally, what the PS5 can really do for games in the long run. Like once we're getting deeper into this generation and there's really no more cross-gen games. Developers are much more familiar with the hardware. They've had a lot more time to get used to it, and they've been developing for it for a while. I really want to see what, especially Sony's teams and Sony Studios, what they can do with this console. I feel like the closest thing we've seen to that is visually, from a visual aspect, Demon's Souls remake, but from a game, development side or just game design side, I think that we've got a little glimpse with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, but I feel like we're still kind of scratching the surface. So there you go. That's what I have for you. Those are my thoughts on the PS5, having it for 1 year. I really enjoyed it. It feels next gen to me. I don't know that it's going to be necessary for everybody, but absolutely great experience. Also, huge shout out to Astro's Playroom. Should have mentioned that earlier, but if you do end up getting a PS5, if you don't have one already, make sure whatever you do, you play Astro's Playroom. You will not regret it. I promise you, it's easily one of the best games that you can experience on PS5. So yeah, leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Leave the video a like, subscribe if you're new, hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share the video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.